Hello and welcome to 9 Star Newsroom. I'm Dave Hill. Our topic today is the Hancock County Jail, specifically overcrowding at the jail and a proposal to build a new jail facility that would take some of the pressure off of the daily jail population. We'll have two guests today to address this important topic. My first guest to talk about it is probably the person who knows the most about jail overcrowding because he sees it every day, is Sheriff Mike Shepard. Sheriff, thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Today. Appreciate you coming into the newsroom to be with us to talk about this. We'll just dive right in.
Okay.
I remember the first time you ran for office in 2006. Jail overcrowding was one of the questions that came up.
Right.
It's come up pretty much every election.
Yes.
Even before you ran, it's just been a constant subtext to the criminal justice discussion for a long time. So it's not a new problem. So what is different now about the discussion? How have we reached a critical mass that we are now to the point where there's a lot more momentum now to build a new jail?
Part of it, I think, the different times I ran and different times we've had overpopulation, the numbers have come back down. And I remember one time around 2009 or 2010, the number got up over 200, but they came back down. And it seemed like when I took office in 2011, it was down around 130, 140 in a jail that holds 157, made for 157. But since the numbers have gone back up this last time, in the last year or so, they've stayed up. We've been consistently in the 190 range, 180 to 190 range, and many times up over 200, close to 220 inmates. And that doesn't include inmates we're holding in other jails for us. There's about 40 inmates being held in other jails. So if we didn't have them in the other jails, we'd be up to, at times, close to 250 inmates.
So some new sentencing guidelines that the legislature passed basically shifted some of the responsibility for housing.
Right.
Low.
1008 a couple of years ago took effect, which now instead of Class A, B, C, D felonies, you have levels 1 through 6. All level 6 felons are kept in the local jails. So that means inmates that would have gone to the Department of Corrections and stayed there are doing their time in our jail. Plus, the drug epidemic has gotten much worse in the last couple of years, and so we're seeing more drug problem and more inmates are drug related.
So the idea right now on the table, this being discussed, there's a referendum on the ballot for May for this proposal, is to build a facility with 400 and
some, about 440 beds.
Okay, which would be roughly twice the size of the facility now.
Yeah, really a little more than twice the size, almost 2.5 times.
Can you just give us the highlights of what this project will include?
The new jail, yes, it would be, the key thing would be more space to do more programs in it. Obviously, right now we're housing inmates and haven't put them in what we call Bose containers that mats are put into, so the inmates are basically sleeping on the floor. Of course, you wouldn't have that problem if we had new jail, more beds there. But part of the problem, we have a lot of different programs, a lot of counseling programs, a lot of help that we're trying to give inmates, but they don't have the room to really do it properly. Right now, most of the time when one of our counselors goes back and they do some counseling or basically group therapy, they have to do it right there in the jail with all the other inmates there to watch. And then, like with kids, school kids, you have that peer pressure. So a lot of times the other inmates are maybe making fun of or ridiculing the inmates that are wanting help, which causes problems then with those inmates, and it's harder to get them the help that they are really wanting. Where in the new jail, would be built with some area that would be like dorm rooms where the inmates that are wanting the help, wanting the counseling, and they're called recovery blocks. So we would have a men's recovery block and a female recovery block where those inmates would be segregated from the other inmates, and that way they wouldn't have the peer pressure on them, and they would get the help that they need. It would be outside of the the area where the other inmates are, and would be just the inmates that are wanting help would be getting the counseling.
Some statistics that play into that. This is as of last October, and this comes from a report that former Judge Richard Culver put together, which included a set of recommendations for the new facility. But he points out, and I've heard this anecdotally for years, that 2/3 of the jail population, the people who are in the jail, are in there because of drug charges or some sort of drug-related matter, and that doesn't even include people who commit other crimes that might be related to somehow to drugs. More than 2/3 lacked formal education, and 85% of the people in jail are there for at least the second time. So obviously something isn't working. The proposal to create these pods, these dorm areas, would go toward helping with education, right?
Yes.
And certainly with drug detox and recovery. A person going into jail with a drug problem needs a medically supervised withdrawal regimen, right?
Right.
How often does that happen now?
Right now, it's very rare. We don't have, that's another problem, we don't really have the room for a good medical facility. I mean, we have a nurse, sometimes two nurses there. We have a nurse pretty much there first and second shift, and a doctor that comes in once a week. But we really don't have the room to give them the medical help that they need, where the new jail would have more medical space, places we could watch people more, better, and just be able to treat them better for their medical conditions.
As we talk about this, I can hear voices back here out in the community saying, that's probably better health care than I can get, because that health care would be free. We shouldn't be paying for health care for inmates. What's your response to that?
Well, no, they're not getting help outside of what is needed, but obviously we have to take care of them. Even by state statute, we have to take care of the inmates. And yes, the tax dollars are paying for that, but we've even done things since I've been in office to help that. We have a medical company now. Instead of having our own nurse, which we started out with, we have a medical company that comes in. They provide the help, they provide the nurses. They take on any liability. If there's any liability, if something, if someone wasn't treated properly, they take on the liability for any medical lawsuits or anything like that. But they are there, like I said, right now, about 16 hours a day, and hopefully in the future we could have 24 hours a day medical help there. But we have to take care of the inmates, and there have been times that we've had to pay for surgery, and there's been different problems there. But we are liable for any medical. Now it is at the Medicare or Medicaid rate, so it's not like they're paying the exorbitant cost that sometimes we had to pay, but we do have to pay for any medical expenses.
Let's get back to the actual facility. Where would the new facility be built?
It's going to be added on to where the community corrections building is right now, which is just east of the old jail, the jail that we're in now. The community corrections building is there. That will be the administrative part of the sheriff's department, and then the jail will be built right behind it. There's a parking lot behind the community corrections, and the jail will be built behind it in that parking lot.
So that would be to the south, the south end of the
Yes, just south of the community corrections.
of the community corrections building, and it would be 3 stories.
It'd be 3-story. Actually, technically, it would be like a 7-story building. You have the administrative hallway, and then on the back will be the kitchen area, the receiving area, stuff like that. And then your second and third floor is actually one floor but 2 layers. So it will be an open area where you would have a central area there that the jail officers could watch it, but it'd be 2 floors of jail space there. So you'd have to go upstairs to go to the second level. And then you'd have the next floor would be the same thing, and then we're talking about at least building a 3rd floor, and if we don't have the money right now, at least would allow for expansion. If we don't finish it out right now, it would allow for expansion then in the future. Then, if we get overcrowded in those first 2 floors, we won't be in the same problem we're in today because they can be added on then to the third floor with potentially up to 600 and some inmates.
Major Brad Burkhart has been, who's your chief deputy, has been leading some tours
Right.
of the jail. And I think probably having taken a tour of the jail myself at a different time, it's a very intimidating place to be. The spaces are all very close.
Right.
You just have a sense of, I won't say danger, but it's intimidating to be in that space. So I know the jail's probably its own best PR tool. And so Major Burkhart has been leading tours from the public to help kind of build the case. What kind of reaction are you hearing from the public?
I know one I actually read in the Daily Reporter made the comment, it was quoted in there, that before he took the tour, he was adamantly against building a new jail. But that really opened his eyes to be able to see the need for the jail. And I was with Major Burkhart on a tour here recently, and people there were talking about it too, that people have no clue, looking at it from the outside, what the conditions are inside, how overcrowded it is, and how there's no space really to move in there. So when they see that, see the conditions, see how it is, it really opens their eyes, and so far it's just been positive comments on needing the new jail.
So conditions at the jail. What is today's population or the
population is 195.
Okay, so it's not as high as it has been, but it's still...
Right, that still doesn't include the 40 that are out at other jails either.
Yeah, that's still way up there.
Right.
And you mentioned a little bit earlier, and you brought a prop along with you today, I want to point to. These little vessels that you put, not
Right.
little, but you put these vessels on the floor, you call them boats. And this is what some of the prisoners
Some of the inmates are
sleep
sleeping in the boats, yes, and because you can't just put a mat on the floor. I don't know if jail standards or health, but doesn't allow that. So we have these big plastic containers, what they are, and then the mat will fit inside of them, and that is okay with them then to sleep on. They're not right on the floor then.
Okay, and you can see one, the sheriff brought one with him just right here behind us. It's basically, it feels like a big piece of Tupperware to me. And it sits on the floor of the cells.
Yes.
Right? So the cells are fairly small to begin with.
That's correct.
Does this take up the rest of the space?
I think that pretty much takes up the rest of the space then. I mean, the cells there's two bunks in each cell. They're welded to the wall, and then that's on the floor space between the bunks and the wall. And then of course, also in that cell you have the toilet and the sink that are kind of combined in there. So that pretty much takes up the space in the jail cell itself.
So you have folks pretty much on top of each other. In the middle of the night, if one person needs to get up to use the bathroom, they're going to be stepping on that person on the floor,
yeah,
right?
Pretty close, yes.
Right. To what extent has the jail, with its overpopulation, become less safe for prisoners? I know you had an altercation not long ago.
We have altercations there occasionally, but they can't. We have cameras in there. We have, so it can be seen by the person, but they just can't really be watched as closely as they should be by the jail officers. And then you have the issue too. So if there is altercation now, we don't have the jail staff then to really go in there. So you have an altercation, and then you have to try to get other jail staff to go in there to break up the altercation. Or even when they're just doing their cell checks, and you have one jail officer going in among, could be 20, 30 inmates in the day room. So it's a safety issue there also.
As we've already talked about, the majority of jail bookings are either directly or indirectly related to drugs. You've got some intervention programs in place, but they can't be effective if you're doing them in the middle of an open room where prisoners who are trying to get better are subjected to taunts and pressure from others who really don't care. So is the county doing enough, do you think, to attack the issue of inmates using drugs at its source to help them better their lives, kick their habits, beat their addictions. And in a perfect world, what would a good program look like for us?
Well, obviously, part of our problem is the space. Yeah, we have these different programs that we are doing, but like you mentioned, it's amongst other inmates. Some of us from probation, and I and some others took a trip down to Dearborn County, and they have this program in their jail. They have the space where they can actually segregate the inmates that are wanting the help. They're wanting the counseling, so they can segregate them there by themselves. They never get in with the general population of the ones that would, like you said, taunt them, make fun of them, or whatever. So that keeps them separate. So they actually will talk among themselves. They will help each other to try to help get off the drugs. And they had an inmate there that could have bonded out, but he refused to because he wanted the counseling at the jail. Knew that if he got back out on the street, he would just go back onto drugs. So he chose to stay in jail and not bond out so he could get this counseling, get the help that he needed so he could stay off of drugs.
We have about a minute left. Has that program in Dearborn County, has it been around long enough for them to be able to measure results?
Yes, and it's been very successful, and I don't remember the percentage of it now, but it's very successful. They did have one guy in there that was actually in the jail the second time. He had a relapse, so he's going through this program again to get that help because he knew that it helped him before. He's going through the program again to get that help. So percentage-wise, the numbers were very high on the people that helped and basically helped keep them out of jail. Then, if we could cut the repeat offenders down, obviously that would help cut the population down some in the jail.
And that's something we really can't do a very good job with
Right.
at the moment.
Right. Again, because we don't have the room to try to get these programs going.
As you've seen, and as you probably will hear a lot more, this problem is a lot more complicated than just building enough space to house people who break the laws. Any discussion about building a new jail necessarily has to take into account the reasons why those people are in jail to begin with. Thank you, Sheriff Shepard, for being part of that conversation. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back here in just a few seconds with our next guest.
These pop-ups are driving me crazy. Just call a 9-Star Nerd.
Find us at 9-Star Connect for safe, in-home help with your computer frustrations. 9-Star Nerds, fastest times in computer repair.
Thanks for sticking around. We appreciate you staying with us in the newsroom today. Our topic is the Hancock County Jail and possible construction of a new facility. $55 million is the price tag. My next guest is the founder of the Watchdogs 46140 Facebook page, which now has a number of followers. I'll be asking him to talk about that a little bit later. George Langston kind of burst onto the public scene about 5 years ago now, as basically a watchdog of Hancock County government. He has attended a lot of meetings. He pays very close attention to the goings-on in government. And until fairly recently, I think, he was a skeptic of the jail program. But George, I think your position has moderated somewhat here lately as the discussion has accelerated about the new jail. Where do you stand nowadays?
We do need a new jail. The reason why we need a new jail is because we don't have the local facilities to handle mental health issues with our prisoners or inmates, and we don't have the facilities for substance abuse. Roughly 30 to 40 inmates each in those categories is in our jail right now, and I don't believe mental health issue inmates should be in jail. Substance abuse, we need the treatment centers. We just don't have them here locally, and that's what's needed. We do have treatment centers that are regional, but we have to take those inmates to those facilities out of the county, and it causes other problems, family and that kind of stuff. We got inmates up in LaGrange County, and it causes problems for the families to go visit and that kind of stuff. And the transportation costs, medical costs. The ones up in LaGrange cost us $35 a day. Now, if they're DOC prisoners, DOC pays for that. But if they're Hancock County prisoners, we're paying for that. And it's roughly, as been stated in these meetings, roughly $39,000 a month to house those people up in LaGrange.
And those are people for whom there's no room
Right.
here in Hancock County. So we contract with LaGrange County to house those prisoners for us, right?
You're correct, and your last guest, you know, he's got the most current because he's the sheriff. I checked on the stats yesterday, and there was 217 inmates in the jail, and 56 of those were female, 161 were male, and then you had 44 inmates in LaGrange, and then I was told late yesterday that there was 10 females in Daviess County, and I just before I come in here, I got that confirmed that was correct. So we got about 200. If you add that all up, it's about 260 prisoners or inmates, and that's a lot for our little 157 capacity jail and the staff we got. And that's my main concern. I've literally watched one deputy escorting 16 prisoners over to the courthouse, and I went, oh, that's not good, because all it would take is one or two prisoners to turn on him, and he's toast.
Well, let's talk about that for a second, because the whole issue of building a new jail aside, and we'll return to that here in a minute, but since you brought up staffing, one thing that I wonder about is once all these facilities are built, and we're talking about a facility that will be able to offer drug intervention programs, because the vast majority of people who are in jail have some sort of connection with drugs, mental health issues, which you've cited and which nationally have burst into the forefront of consciousness here the last couple of years. We'd have professionals who would be in our facility administering programs for mental illness. All that's going to get really expensive. And assuming you have a bigger jail population, you're also going to have to hire more jailers. The sheriff's candidates, I think, all want to hire more deputies. Beyond the bond issue for paying for a new jail is going to be the operational costs, which is going to fall year after year after year. That's something that will be affixed permanently to the budget. Have you done any kind of, speculating or looking at numbers as far as how that might be impacted?
Yes, every month I put out a end of month report, and I show the 7 what we call the discretionary spending accounts, general fund and Cadget, which has been rolled into the general fund, and then you got capital improvement or development fund, which is a property tax. You got rainy day, and you got what's called local income tax, 1170. That's the new terminology for public safety, LOIT. And you got what's the other one? I can't tell you. But anyway, there's 7 accounts, and at the end of the year, which is the best time to see how the county is doing as far as funding is concerned, I look at those numbers at the end of the year. The property taxes are on the books, what they've collected. And so you get a pretty good idea how the county's doing financially off of these 7 accounts out of 184. And our current state and county budget is currently approximately $34 million. Well, in these 7 accounts, at the end of the year, it totaled over $19.5 million in just those 7 accounts. So we got money. Now, you'll hear them say that they need more money, and I'm not challenging them that there isn't a need, because they spend roughly $3 million in the first 6 months of the new year. Okay, and it comes out of all these different accounts. But there is a point where you overtax the population, and we don't have any economic growth in this county. And part of it is because we overtax. But with the jail is one of the three things that I say the county has to do. They have to fix the roads, they have to have good schools, and they have to have public safety. And this is a public safety issue. And you can't wait till you have a real problem like we got right now. What we got in the jail is a tinderbox. All it would take is 1 or 2 prisoners to strike the match, and that place could blow up, and then we're into a lot of lawsuits. We already had an incident where an inmate was beaten. Now, this is my rough guess. I don't have any information on it, but it's my opinion that they're probably settling out of court with this guy on a figure on what he's going to get paid for being beat up in the jail. And that way you keep it out of court, then the judge won't order you to lower the population rate. But it's going to take, all it's going to take is one incident, and a federal judge gets involved, and he's going to mandate that we start releasing prisoners down to acceptable capacity level. They're doing that in Marion County every night over there. They got to have X amount of people in the jail, and if they're overcrowded, they have to release people under a federal court order. And that's getting where we're going.
At one time, you were part of one of the Tea Party groups, right? You know, I think at one time you would have said that's a scare tactic.
It's not a scare tactic now, it's reality. Yesterday, 217 inmates in the jail, sleeping on the floor, crowded into jail cells that were meant for 2 people. It's a problem. Our jail was not built for the new criminal codes that came out in 2014 and took effect in 2015. Before that, our jail capacity was 112 people at times, and every now and then would go above that. But now we're constantly 195, 200, 220. Yesterday was the biggest figure I've seen since I've been listening to this, approximately 260 inmates spread out all over the place. And it's costing the taxpayers money. And it will continue to cost the taxpayer money. And if we have lawsuits, they can get up to $750,000 based on state regulations. People can sue up to that point. So, like I said, one of these jailhouse lawyers gets really, really smart, and we're in trouble.
So a skeptic no more.
No,
Right.
I'm not. I'll sit right here and tell you, I'm pleading with the people that's listening to me to tell their friends to allow this bond to go through. If we don't, interest rates are going to go up, and that's going to cost us even more. They're saying roughly $85 million after everything is the total cost of what this is going to cost. I think it's going to be higher than that because of the interest rates. By the time we lock in the interest rates, I think it's going to be closer to $100 million.
George, I want to move on. Thank you for sharing your insights about the jail. But I want to ask you about Watchdogs 46140. I only became aware of your page here in the last 6 months or so, and I guess excited might not be the best word, but I'm gratified to see that someone in the community is paying pretty close attention to government, who's not necessarily with the newspaper or with the media. How did you get started with the page?
Well, as the Tea Party is, I'm not going to say dead, but we're not as cohesive as we used to be. And so we were looking for ways to get the message out and to look over the shoulder of our elected officials and let people know what's going on and try to give as true a picture without bringing any bias into it. Now, I will admit, I am a conservative. I don't like spending money, and I like small government. But again, when it comes down to the jail and this, it's important that we realize that you just can't wait a few years, because it's going to cost us in the long run. It's just going to make it worse. You know, we talked about the fairgrounds. I was totally against the $40 million fairgrounds. I even testified at the Ways and Means Committee in 2016. One of 6 people who testified against it, and we were lucky to get that one stopped. But the last 3 years, they've been going back year after year, and this year, the fairgrounds food and beverage tax, we got to wait until the end of the session, but they have stripped that language and put it in another bill, and that might get passed this year. We're just holding our breath to see what happens. And I got that from the meeting at the Xplex meeting last night, that I am now a member of that board.
So this is what watchdogging is about.
This is what watchdogging is about.
Yes, it's about keeping an eye on, and we don't have enough
No.
people doing what you're doing in the community. So how many followers does your page have now?
I have 47 so far, but I've had up to over 600 hit on different stories and stuff that I've put out there.
Okay, we're out of time, but I did want to be sure we talked about Watchdogs. If you're on Facebook, you can look up Watchdogs 46140. You can follow that page, which is run by George Langston. Thank you, George, for being with us today and sharing some of your insights. Keep up the good work with the page. I hope you get a lot more followers as a result of this. Thanks for watching, too. We appreciate you being with us today. I'm Dave Hill for 9 Star Newsroom. We'll see you again next time.